you approach your first 100 days as a global executive in a new role or company? Our guest today is Liesbeth Vanderlande. She is a global executive coach, author, speaker, and a recognized authority in the field of leadership. She has coached leaders in over 25 countries, including leaders at multinational corporations like the Coca-Cola Company, PwC, Danone, the Bottling Investment Group, Vanderlande, and Oliver Wyman. She is currently in Hong Kong and on her way to move to Dubai very shortly. And today we're going to talk about her brilliant new book, which is called Connect, Inspire, and Grow, and the Executive's Framework for the First 100 Days. And I was really excited to read this. It is a definitive guide for senior leaders and executives stepping into new global leadership roles. And it is an incredibly practical tool. And so I'm excited to dive into it here today. Liesbeth, welcome to the Leaders Transformation. We're glad you're here.
Thank you, Nicole. Thanks for the introduction. Always makes me blush a little when people start talking about you and what you've done, because you're always focused on what's going to happen, right? And thanks
That's
for
right.
those words.
That's right. You know, it's funny, if I was to read your whole bio, I would still be here for several minutes. So you're tremendously accomplished. And so we're excited to learn from you and to learn about from your experiences. And I think that's going to help our leaders here who want to make a big difference in the world, and especially those that are traveling to different countries. And I know you work a lot with expats and so forth. But before we dive in any further, I do want to do a shout out to the team at Smith Publicity for introducing us. And they have been a great supporter of the show. So thank you to them and Emily, who connected us. And they always provide top-notch guests. So we appreciate them. So, Liesbeth, let's talk about, there's a statistic that I think really stands out as a purpose or a reason why this material is so important. And that is that 40% of executives entering a global position fail. Why is that?
That's right. Yes, there's actually research done by INSEAD in Europe about this number, and indeed 40%, and it's a huge number, right? And realizing that each expat assignment will cost the company approximately $300,000, having that 40% fail, it's a lot of money. And so why is that? And there's a couple of things. There's probably a part where the organization is involved, and there's a part where the leader is involved. And to start up with the organization, it also comes down to also selecting the right person, right? Who do you choose to go overseas? What do you focus on in terms of qualities, characteristics, personal traits, skills? And what I see, and there's what I see organizations do, and which I believe is a big mistake, is they only choose based on technical abilities. So people have done a great job so far in the organization being an expert in their field, and then they say, okay, I'd like you to go to another side of the organization, possibly another side of the world, and align processes, make sure the technical information and knowledge and your expertise being transferred to people there locally. And that's why we want you to go. So they solely look at the technical capabilities of people. And actually then they arrive there, they try to do exactly what they've done in the previous role, because that's why they was been selected, right? They want to transfer the expertise, trying to align, trying to teach people, and they're running into a wall. And that's often because there are other skills and competencies that people preferably should have when they go overseas. Or actually, it's all about what do you do on the ground, and how do you build trust with people? How do you connect with people? And especially when you're in an environment where you may be speaking a different language, where things are different, the culture is different. So how do you do that? And just diving in from a technical aspect may not always be working. So that's one aspect, right? So are we selecting based on the right qualities of people. Another point is what the research tells us is that people who are actually going abroad and have been working in this foreign environment for a couple of months, they report back that it's hard to get connected in the new organization. So how are we doing as an organization? Prepare the person enough to when they land, what is it that they need to focus on? But they also report that there's a sense of loneliness. Like, I don't feel the support from the headquarters. I don't feel the support or the understanding of what I'm up against, all these challenges that I have right here. So how do we make sure that we continue to support the person that goes abroad with all the challenges that they're facing locally, but also in terms of support from headquarters? So that's another aspect. And the third is really how do we plan? How do we make sure that everything else around this person that's going is taken care of? Family, schools, housing, insurances, taxes, all that stuff that is completely different. That works completely different in different countries. So that whole, let's say, the logistics around the move, which is very important because it can distract so heavily from what the person should be focusing on. You know, imagine your family is not being happy because they're in a home that they don't feel, or the kids are going to. I've experienced myself that actually my kids went to a school when I just moved to Shanghai. We found out after half a year that the school was going bankrupt. I was in China. The management was a building organization, and they had a school. We didn't know that. This was the construct. We found out the school went bankrupt. So, and then all of a sudden your kids are not. So these kind of things happen. So how do we really prepare and plan very thoroughly to make sure that not only the person in the organization is landing well, but the family as well?
Well, there's so much going on. And then the expectation of them going, and obviously if they're being sent there, there's a result that they need to get, and they have a certain amount of time. How long is generally the time frame that they have to get results? I'm sure that varies, but yeah.
Exactly. It's a great point, because there's an additional pressure on them to perform, because these assignments, since they cost a lot of money, they're always almost always there's a 3 to 4 years, these are 3 to 4 years assignments. So there's a deadline. And that's why there's extra pressure to perform relatively quickly.
Yeah. Well, and when you talk about in your book about the first 100 days as being so critical to, it's the framework that they're setting up. And so maybe let's talk about some of the aspects of this. So in their first, I mean, you've got a framework. You can talk about your 3-step framework and kind of start from there.
So the framework, and I call it, this is the title of the book, Connect, Inspire, Grow. It really talks about the 3 phases that people go through in the first few months of their assignment. And it is about focusing on the right things. So the framework is, and that's why I wrote the book, is helping people to focus and prepare well. So their first 100 days is really setting the foundation for what's going to come next, so that they are well set up and they can actually complete their assignment successfully. And there's a lot of aspects around it, but the framework will help them, in the first 100 days. So Connect is all about having the kind of conversations with people that to instill trust. So to build trust right from day one, because that's very important. You have to do it with the people that are there. So how you build trust right from the beginning is enormously important. So that's the first, let's say, 40 days. The second point, Inspire, is all about how do I convert the vision that I have for what I'm supposed to be doing and how I'm going to get the results. How do I convert that in plans and strategies that actually get people on board, that people feel excited to be part of? So how do I inspire people? And the third part is the grow part. And grow will actually be the last part, but it will continue throughout your whole assignment. So it doesn't stop after 100 days. It really continues, because it's answering the question, how do I keep talent on board? So what I'm actually doing in these 2-3 years, I'm creating something, and often these assignments are opening up a new market, or like we said in the beginning, transfer knowledge, or it can be about solving a particular issue locally, or finding new clients, expanding the market. So how do I build something which is sustainable? And that all comes down to, how do I keep talent on board? So when I'm moving on after 2-3 years, how do I leave something behind with a team of people locally that will continue the work that I've started doing? And if talent's walking out of the door, then your solution, it's going to waste at the end of the day if it's not taken care of by people who have the knowledge that you've given them during your assignment.
So with people transitioning and moving in every 3 to 4 years, there's always a new way of doing things. There's like we talked about, first of all, there's getting them there and their family and situating them. And then there's that first 100 days to get them started. And I think about, it's kind of like, we look at in the US, we have like a new president every 4 years, or every country's different, and the way that we're, so you have a new leader who has a different way of doing things, and a different approach to doing things. And so how do you make that seamless so that you're not constantly starting over, like you just said, that you can set yourself up to, for that growth to happen long after you leave, and that the next person that comes doesn't have to go and restart all over again? If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And there's it's a big question, because a lot of different components of how to do it. So let's talk about a few of the components. For me, whatever you're creating, it starts and ends with the leader. So and that's your role, right? You have to create something in the team that will last for a longer period of time, and that people are comfortable with and are actually believing in. But it doesn't start with the team, it starts with the leader. And there's a piece of research that came out that was done. There was a research done on what interpersonal skills make success. So what a lot of executives and leaders were interviewed, and they found that the common denominator was high level of self-awareness. So when we're talking about the leader, and it's starting with the leader, it actually comes down to what are the levels of self-awareness with the leaders. And that's about having to take a sincere look at and honest and taking an honest look at yourself. Like, how am I showing up? Why am I doing things the way I do? And guess what, Nicole? There's not a lot of time that is spent in organizations, in business schools. I did an MBA myself. 0 time was spent on building self-awareness. It's not a skill that everybody has automatically. Some people have it, but it's a skill that can be developed, right? But some people have it more naturally, or they have been developing it, coming from a family where that's been, but a lot of people don't have it. But it's essential, because if you know how you think yourself, how you think and feel, that drives everything. It drives your actions, it drives your results, and ultimately drives your success. So taking a very close and look at how your thinking process and how your thought process and how your thinking patterns function will help you. So imagine a leader coming in, and I've had that, all stressed out about one of their people, and this is an example not so long ago. She said, well, I have this person on the team. I'm just not happy with what he's doing. He should be delivering on this project. He is not, and now he cancels my one-on-one with him. So I'm pretty annoyed, and I'm about to send a very ugly email to him. But she knows from growing her self-awareness that she said, okay, I'm not going to do that. I need to step back and check in with myself. What's making me so annoyed? Why am I, what do I think that's going on right here? What else may be going on? Where do I feel that emotion? You know, why does it make me upset? So it's all asking yourself these questions and then figuring out, okay, is this the way that I want to show up? Or can I shift my emotions? Or can I shift my thoughts? Or can I create a more productive thought that will help make this, come up with a solution, or at least show up differently in the situation, that it will not explode? And this is an annoyance, but there are all kinds of emotions that people. So having that self-awareness will make you manage yourself in a better way, but also manage your team in a different way, and ultimately the business. So that's one component. And that's where the book starts, is really taking a close and honest look at yourself and how you're showing up in situations. So that's one component. Then it's also looking at, how do I build trust with people? How do I connect with people? And that's why we're making the shift from self to the people around us, because you cannot do everything yourself. You're relying on your team to create the results. So how do you work with your team, and how do you build trust with them? And in the book, I've used this tool with many people. The most successful way that I've seen leaders do it is building something what I call professional intimacy. And professional intimacy is really trying to build a connection with people where you go beyond the function. And not perceive people as, okay, this is my team leader, or this is my team person in the team, or this is my client. No, go beyond and look at the human being behind that. So professional intimacy is really, and you'll have those conversations in the beginning a lot. The first few months, you'll just be going through conversations. And to build that professional intimacy will get people to trust you more quickly. And you'll get to the core of what's happening in teams, in organizations, more quickly. And it actually comes down to doing three things in the initial conversation. It's really paying attention and being in listening mode to what the other person is saying. And you actually, the first point is, you're trying to find out as much as possible about the other person by asking questions. So you're not there to impress people. You're there to listen and absorb and gain information. So the first point on the agenda will be, what do I know? What do I want to know about this person? And who is he or she? What's their journey been like? Why did they choose the profession that they're in? What's important for them? So really finding out more about that person, not just about the role, but really what is the more context about, especially when you're in new organizations or in new countries. People have different stories, and it's important to pay attention to that, because it will convey your interest, and people will feel that, like, hey, this person's really interested in me, not just in what I do, but in who I am as a person. So that's number one. The second thing is, what are people's opportunities, pain points, challenges? What are things that you as a leader may be able to help them with? And because if you want to get people on board, then people will want to know that you have their back. And if you're helping them with particular points, they feel like, hey, they really care about I'm not just here to do whatever he or she is wanting me to do in terms of their mission. They're here to support me as well. So that's your second point on the agenda. What are their pain points? What are their challenges? What are opportunities? And then the third point is really about, how will the other person be able to help me with my challenges, pain points, and assignments? So this is the moment where you share your vision, and this is what I envision. It's to what I want to do here in my time here, and what is it that you can help me with? So just those 3 points. If those are your agenda points for the first few conversations, then you'll have a different conversation. But being listening mode and be asking a lot of questions, and it's all about you getting to know the other person.
Yeah, and in the context of of setting it up for the next person as well, what I'm hearing is that when it's on performance, obviously there are certain things that need to happen, right?
Hmm.
They're there for a reason. They're opening up a new market. There's an outcome. There's a top line, bottom line outcome that they're looking for. The company is looking for, parent company, whatever. And but what you're talking about is very relational. And if they and it's actually building leaders, right? So that's what I'm hearing in the midst of this. And so it's literally taking somebody as I picture like the baton, right? Somebody's handing over the baton and you have the baton for a certain amount of laps or whatever, a certain amount of years. And it's like now I take them for where it was to now to the next stage, and then somebody else will take them to the next stage. And if it's done well, based on the model that you're talking about here, when it's done well, it continues to build on each other as opposed to having to reset and correct. Now, I imagine with a 40% failure rate in executives, there is some undoing that needs to happen at some level because somewhere along the line, somebody dropped the baton, somebody didn't do that part of it.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, how do you, let's say somebody gets in that position where they need to correct
Hmm.
the direction, um, and gain buy-in. You talk about in your book having vision, right, and inspiring people to a vision, and also buy-in. You can't have one without the other, otherwise it doesn't work. So talk a little bit about that. If somebody's saying, well, that's great, and I actually have distrust, so obviously all of what you're talking about is important to start off with, to correct that. Then there's some like other things that they're going to need to do to really turn the ship in the right direction.
And exactly to your point, the connection phase is really about building that personal connection. So it allows people to share with you what's been really going on because they feel safe in doing so. So that's the important, and the part that you're talking about is like, okay, now we've built this connection, the trust is there, or the beginning of trust is there. And now we start to have to create results and create plans and strategies. So how do we get people on board and create something that will last a longer period of time? And that's really when you start getting the team together. So the framework that I'm talking about is we have a couple of things that we want to do in the second part of our of the framework. Of the second piece of what we want to do when we start is, okay, inspiring is all about the why you're doing things, right? Is the intention. So if you have a particular vision of why you want particular things to be done, it's not that you are very inspiring, it's your ideas, your intention behind it that will touch on something that people will say, hey, that's interesting, I believe in that.
That's an
But when
interesting
the
point.
next
I
thing
just
you,
want to jump in there because that's a very important distinction. What you just said there is that it's not getting people to be inspired by you, but it's getting them to be inspired by the idea. That's
by the
that's
idea.
super important. Yes. Yes. Especially if it's
And
going to live long after you're gone.
exactly right. So what I see happens often is, okay, well, we have this idea and everybody's like, yeah, excited about the idea, let's do that. And then when people start to come up with strategy and plans and start to push it top down, then you lose those people again. So I would always turn it upside down and say, okay, well, this is where we need to get to. Now, the whole path of how we're going to get there, I need you guys. So we're going to spend time together and talk about who are we as a team. We have that result. We need to get there. Where are we now? Who are we now? What are we known for? What are we good at? What are we not so good at? Where are the gaps? What is it that we are now, and what is it, and who do we need to be to get there? So you'll have these conversations with your team about who are we as a team, and in the beginning you'll have lots of people saying, yeah, but we've tried this before, we've done this, and that didn't work, and so it is navigating through that, but really having open conversations with people saying, okay, Let's not look at what we've done before. Let's not look at all the differences that we had. But what is a common, what do we have in common? What do we agree on? What are the things that actually make us stronger when working together? So it's finding the commonalities and not as much looking at the differences. So what you're trying to come up with is shared goals, a shared new identity. Like, okay, can we all be excited about what we're trying to create here as a team? Because this is who we want to be. So we need to polish it up. We need to get maybe new people on board. We may need to train some more people, but can we all get excited about who we want to be as a team on our way to getting there? So it's all about identity. It's not about the plans, the strategies, how we're going to do it. It's who we need to be to do that. And that will create a new identity in the team, a new vision and a new idea of, hey, this is a team that I get excited about. I want to be part of that. And people will open up saying, okay, well, I got a couple of ideas. I want to share this. And then it will become the people's idea, the people's goals, the people's project. So it's, and then you create something that they believe will, and they're excited about working on that because they feel heard, they feel respected, they feel seen because their input is being listened to, is being integrated in what's being created. And then the buy-in, as you're talking about, is so much easier because people see that what they're creating is actually part of them as well. So that's the inspire part of the framework, which is so important. Because it makes everything that comes a lot easier. I've actually been working with one leader, and she said it's actually a decision that you want to make as a leader. Do you want the results right now at the beginning, or do you want the results that are lasting? And the difference is building that trust first, which can take a little bit longer. So you have to take into consideration you may not get the results immediately. But once you get the people on board, and once you have that trust, and once people trust each other, trust the team, we created that new team identity by asking a lot of questions. And there's very specific questions in the book that can help you with this phase in creating that team identity. That's when you have the results that will last a lot longer because people believe in what's being created is actually, they've been part of creating that, and that will create a buy-in.
So this is the leaders of transformation, right? So there's leaders that are creating transformation. A lot of times we make this assumption that transformation is going in and changing something into something else, which transformation is. It's like this metamorphosis, but it doesn't have to be that. And it's interesting as I'm pulling together what we've talked about here is this idea of self-awareness and getting to know yourself as a leader and how you lead. It's almost like you've got to figure out what that is and then set it aside who you are and get really clear on who the people are that are on the team, because it's about them and it's about what they're going to create. And then it's the growth, it is the execution on that and the fulfillment of that is what I'm hearing. And so it's getting outside this idea of, I want to put my mark on it. And we hear that a lot. Certainly I know in this Western hemisphere, we hear that a lot. It's like, I want to put my mark on it. I want to make a difference. I want to, to do something great. And what you're saying is, which I think is there's a, perhaps for you, it's second nature because you've been doing this for a long time, but I think it deserves being emphasized that it's not about the leader themselves. They have a role and then they're going to go on to another role. And if we would just if we would just look at our lives that way, one of the things that I often say is like, it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't need the credit. Like you can just, you just set that aside and get to work with what actually needs to happen and who is the best person for that and what are the skills they need to have. I think that's really powerful.
And any business, I've always learned, any business is a relationship business. So it's never you. It's never just you. So wherever you go, you have to focus on the relationship with the people around you that can make you, well, you and your team then achieve what you want to achieve. You can never do that by yourself, and you can never only be the one person that gets the credit for it. No, definitely.
Yeah. I want to go back to this connect phase because talk about self-awareness, leading self, and then leading others. How do you address leaders? Because you've coached so many leaders. I'm sure you've seen this. How do you address leaders who think, I'm a good leader, people connect with me, and really that's not actually accurate, but they think it is. So they have some assumptions. And how do you create awareness where it's maybe lacking?
Right. Yeah, and I do recognize what you're saying. People coming in, they say, well, I've actually had one example of somebody who really said, I'm proud of my personal skills. I really work with people very, very well. And he hired somebody new in his team, senior person, and he did everything that he always done in terms of making her land well and opening doors for her in terms of inviting her to come to meetings to meet with senior people. And so he was involving her a lot in what he was doing to allow her to get more connected and build bonds with people. And at one point she was in a meeting with him on a one-on-one, and she exploded on him. She said, well, you don't trust me. I'm feeling really annoyed by what's been going on. I don't feel you're respecting me. And he was taken completely by surprise. He said, I had never seen this coming. What is going on? And she felt she was a senior, experienced person. She felt like, I don't need you to open doors with me. I'm pretty capable of doing that myself. So she felt undermined, and she felt not being taken seriously. So the step that he had been missing is he thought, I'm doing all the right things. I know how this thing works. Don't tell me anything new. But the part that he was missing is checking in with her in what she needed. And it's what every employee needs. In fact, it's what every human needs. Is people want to be seen, people want to be respected, and people want to grow. And those are the things that you want to have very clear with the people that you're leading. Like, how can I make them feel seen? How can I make them feel respected? And how can I make them grow? Especially the grow part here was he was doing it completely different. And she was just, I know all these things, what you're doing for me. I need different things. But they forgot to have that conversation. So, and what I'm trying to say with the story is people get fixed in their ways of doing things because it helped in the past, but it may not be what may be helping them in the future. So it's always having that awareness of not checking in with other people. How can I make you feel seen? How can I make you feel respected? How can I make you grow? And you'll hear different stories because every human wants that in a different way. So, when people are saying, okay, well, this is the way that things need to be done. I've always done it this way. That's probably where I would go. Okay, well, this is for you, but how are you helping other people to grow and develop? And are you checking in what's important for them? So, yeah.
Well, and also I think about leaders having a lot of responsibilities, a lot of expectations. They've got to deliver results and balancing out this idea of the metrics, performance metrics, specifically around the business performance itself. And then spending time here. And I hear that a lot from leaders. It's like, I don't have time for this. I don't have time. It's like the slow process of getting to know people and all the things that you're talking about. And what I'm hearing you say is that slow is fast, is you do this and then everything else.
It's slowing down to move faster, longer. So some are saying, okay, actually building trust and building relationship is a result on itself. It's your first result. And from that, you can accelerate. And then all the changes that you want to make are going to be so much more effortless if you have people on board. So it's a different approach. It may seem slower, and it's almost counterintuitive with what people want to do when they start in the role. I want to go fast. I want to make results quickly. I want to do this and that and make sure that I'm seen to be making progress and have results. But yes, this approach may be slower in the beginning, but it makes the rest of the journey so much more easier. And I've had also a senior executive that went to it was a plant manager of a huge plant for a big brand, an American brand actually. And she said, well, I need to make this whole organization leaner. So I need to cut costs. That's what I need to be doing. And I can just go in there and say, okay, well, I've looked at the numbers and I'm going to, with a big red marker, this is going to go, I'm going to cut costs very, very, very quickly. But I knew that was not going to be a long lasting result because I would get so much backlash from people. So I need to build trust first. And then when I'm hearing what's really behind all the decisions that have been taken earlier, I can make a more informed decision and I can involve them in, okay, what is it that we can do together to do this exercise and see where we can cut the costs. And it was a bit slower, but she says, I got the buy-in. It was so much easier. Everybody was, and hi guys, let me make some suggestions. What are your thoughts about this? And those conversations, they were open to having these conversations. And that's a completely different story. Would she not have built the trust in the beginning and just gone in and say, okay, this is the way we're going to do things?
Yes, and in that example, I also think about it makes sense to them, and they might even suggest that and saying, okay, so this, we know why you're doing it, even if she ends up having to make the same decisions that she would have made before. That's really good. One last thing before we finish off, I wanted to talk about as a leader, because some of the people that are listening, of course, they work at a company. Maybe their company isn't set up for this type of model. So their company has expectations of them going in and getting results very quickly. How does a leader, on the flip side, communicate to their company the right expectations? Because a lot of times, and I know, and not to stereotype, but men tend to promote themselves a little bit and say, oh, I can do that, I can do that. Women have a tendency, correct me if I'm wrong, but my experience is that women have a tendency to kind of like downplay their what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And but either way, right? I mean, there's a promise, an expectation that they're making. And so how do they make that? How do they articulate that well so that there's patience on the other side while they're going through this process and really defining, hey, these are results. It may not look like it on the top line, bottom line, although it probably will impact it anyway when you're building trust. But to lay that out for them so that they know how to set up themselves for success from that angle.
Yeah, it depends a lot on the organization in how they reward people. So if the reward is just about, okay, get me those financial results, that's what I need, then that's what people will focus on. And the tendencies will be to probably skip over the framework and just get to the results. And then, after 2 or 3 years, they move on, and what they leave is not a sustainable solution. But yes, there are a lot of organizations that are just focusing still on the result. And what's, I think, for the leader very important is to create that context around it. To not just say, okay, well, these are the results. Of course, you have these conversations where you're going through the numbers, but to have that conversation about context. Because I've worked with many here in Asia with lots of people working for American, European companies, and their headquarters are on the other side of the world. It's how can you explain really what's going on locally? That is so important for people because, as we said in the beginning, people feel lonely because the people on the other side of the world, they don't understand what's really going on. And you have a role into playing that as well. How are you creating the stories and creating and then making clear that this is the context that I'm working in. So another aspect to this issue of conversation, and I think this is more for the organization, is how are you going to reward people? Are you just going to reward people on getting them the results, or are you also going to reward people on, okay, we need to create teamwork, because these are the sustainable aspects of results, right? In how are we going to make, how do we make sure that the team and the talent stays on board? So can we make some, can we award people for that? How can we award people for teamwork? Are we for collaboration, for relationships with customers? How are we going to create, that person probably needs to create a network. Can we measure that network? And how valuable is that for us? How can we make sure that he leaves something, or she leaves something that somebody else can just go in once that person leaves and take over? So how transparent is it? How open is it for other people to tap into those networks? Can we have other people involved and introduced once that person is on the way out, for a new person to go in? So it can never be, it's me creating this. It really has to come from the senior management to say, okay, we cannot have somebody who's sitting on all that knowledge and network and relationships, because when that person leaves, then, you know, it will fall apart. So driving that assignment and just rewarding it based on results only may not be the best approach. So, but it's up to the leader itself. If they know that in advance that that's going to be important and that's part of what they need to create in the time they're there, they need to make that part of their reward package. Okay, I'm just not going to have the results bottom line, but there's a whole lot of range of things, of information, relationships, network, partnerships that I'll be creating that's going to be valuable for the company once I leave.
Yeah. So communication both ways. So there's communication, there's connecting and inspiring and growing, this way as you're arriving locally. And then there's also the other side of communicating and translating it into a way. So this is a skill set. What you're talking about is the skill set of being able to communicate what's actually going on with both parties. If somebody is the sandwich in the middle, that they can do that, so that if it's like, oh, you want results, so this is how we're getting the results. And somewhere in the book you talk about this idea of communicating back home to where, to in terms of what is actually going on. It's not like no news is good news. Let them know what's happening, so they're not wondering and saying, hey, we haven't heard from you and we haven't seen the results improve. What's happening? So there's that communication that goes both ways. That's really good. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that is important for leaders to know as it relates to this? And of course, it's all in your book. I know there's so much more in your book, but
and very short maybe, and because that's something that I heard a lot of leaders say is, okay, it's a different culture. That's why it didn't work. I'm moving in this organization in a different country. Everything's different, and I've actually, I know one person that I've known from my time in Shanghai who came in there all excited about starting a new job, and yes, it was a sales director, all excited about the new job, and he was going to turn things around and expand a bit. 6 months down the line, totally frustrated. He says, I'm not making any progress. People are underqualified. There's not the team that I can work with. Clients don't understand what we're trying to do here in terms of services. And so I'm just gonna, it's never gonna work. It's this culture. It's just not my culture. I can't do this. And so culture is, and that may be true, not even going to the other side of the world, but even in a different organization, right? You have an organization culture. You think, well, these people just don't understand me. I don't understand them. But what's actually happening is they're focusing on all the differences. And when that's happening, when you're fixating on everything that's different or wrong, then that will drive a gap between you and what you're trying to create. And what often happens as a result is people disengage, they disconnect with their environment, and they blame culture for not getting the results. So that aspect of culture is, and I've touched on it, and I think it's just a very important point, that if you want to build something and create something with other people, that, yes, may have different stories and different backgrounds, start with the commonalities. Start with commonalities. What are the, and that's why you're having these conversations in the beginning about, what do I know about that story? What's interesting about this person? Not what's different, but what's interesting. What can I take away from the story? What is one skill that they have that I really value? And start there. And then I'm sure you'll find something, even with people that seem to be, you seem to have nothing in common with. Keep focusing and keep having conversations. There's something will come up and will pop up that will connect you with that person. And that's valuable for your relationship and for the way that you're working with them. So, and that's true for foreign cultures, but it's as much true for different company cultures as well.
So who did they, how do they decide who they're going to meet with?
That's great points, actually, because
Can't meet with
initially
them all.
most organizations that you'll not just, but you'll get a onboarding program. So that decision is already made for you. So, okay, these are the people based on hierarchy, often like, okay, these are my senior leaders, I'm going to meet with them, and these are my peers, and these are my team members. What I suggest in the book, and actually there's a tool which is called the Connect card, which is a foundation for people in the first 40 days to build your connections with. So it's a free downloadable PDF from my website. But the Connect card is really something that is focused on what are the skills and capabilities that I need to complete my assignment. So it's not based on, okay, based on hierarchy. It's really based on what is the knowledge, what are the skills that I need, and who in the organization has those skills. And it's helpful because you focus on, how is my project going to impact other people? So I need to have connection with people that are being impacted by my project, and who will impact my project. So who are the influences in my project? So we'll have to have conversations and relationships with them. So it's you take your assignment as the central point, and then who is the circle around it that is being influenced, or that will influence my project, and start connecting with those people. And so the Connect card is there, and it asks a lot of questions, but if you answer them, then you have your piece and your list of people that you need to connect to, or which are most useful to connect to, because they're the ones that are most influential in your first, let's say, 100 days for your assignment.
Yes, and I loved that Connect card. I thought that was a really great tool that leaders can use just in general, because it helps them focus on those relationships that they, not just my direct reports or that's who I need to have relationships with, but really looking at even going into more depth of that. That is really, really good. So yeah.
What helps as well is because not all organizations are top-down hierarchy, right? The network organization, matrix organizations. So it doesn't really help always to just look at the hierarchy and say, okay, these are the people I connect with. It's more who will be do I need to influence, who will be influenced by what I'm trying to do, and what are the skills and capabilities that I need, and who has them. They may be people across, outside of the organization, but you'll need that knowledge base, because that's what's making your assignment succeed or fail possibly.
Yes, and you also mentioned in your book about circling back afterwards. So you've done this process, and then you're going back and verifying that. So it's not just a one and done. I had this conversation with this person, and now I have quote unquote trust. And you, just like you said earlier, you're starting to build trust. Trust is built over time. This is so good. I really appreciate it. And there's so much in your book. There's so much in your book. And I told you before, is that I went through it for this interview and prepared, and it's going to be on my shelf to go through again, because there's just so much valuable information in it. So thank you for that. And I'm going to encourage our listeners to go get a copy of Connect, Inspire, Grow, and the Executives Framework for the First 100 Days. even if, I always say leaders of transformation take action, even if you're a leader and you're in an existing role and you're not moving to another company or in a new role, I would encourage you to read this because there's a lot of very valuable tools, some things that you may have skipped over in your in launching your company, and or maybe even just being at that stage where your company's grown so much, there's new people and there's things that are going on that you're not aware of. I would encourage you to read this book, and you'll get so much value out of it. And so we're going to make sure there's a link, of course, in the show notes for that. It's also on Amazon and all the different places. The website to go to if you want to learn more about what Liesbeth is doing, and or if you are looking for some coaching and consulting in this specific area, obviously she's an expert, go to gltd.co. And again, we'll make sure that's in the show notes as well. And Liesbeth, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking some of your valuable time here to share with us today. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole, for having me on the show. And it's been a pleasure. I really love that conversation. Thank you.
Likewise. Likewise. All right. Well, we look forward to, thank you for our listeners for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you next week on another episode of the Leaders Transformation, where we have another amazing guest who is creating transformation in the world and helping this world become a better place for everyone. So we look forward to seeing you then. Have a great day.